Hello, good people of YouTube. Sealord here, and today we are going over my top 5 most frustrating ships to fight against. These are 5 ships that when they show up on your side of the map, at least when I'm playing, I kind of just go, oh great, I gotta deal with XYZ here, and it's going to be an absolute pain to try and do that. So I'm not saying these are 5 ships that necessarily need to be nerfed or anything. I'm just saying that they are 5 very strong ships that are at times exceptionally frustrating to try and counter because it's just absolutely painful to try and deal with them, and in some cases maybe ignoring them for some time might be the best thing to do. So let's go ahead and get right on in to it, shall we? Starting out with number 5, which is the tier 10 French destroyer, the Marceau. There's a reason this guy is like a 100% pick a lot of times for COTS and clan battles, and is also why her and her sister, cousin-ish, the Kleber, are usually limited to 1 or again outright banned in COTS or clan battles. These guys are just so good at being annoying, especially when they're being played by a solid gunboat DD player. These ships are excellent at going to a flank and just being the thorn in the side of the enemy team that you need them to be. If there's a ship that you want to distract like half of the enemy team, it's a Marceau or a Kleber. Now, why is Marceau here and not Kleber? Well, Kleber, for what she is, which is again a lot the same as a Marceau, at least her guns normally don't have a fast, reload time. The Marceau does. She has smaller guns, so obviously they have less pins and less alpha. But because of that, you get this just constant stream of HE shells. That is going to be exceptionally annoying to any battleship or large cruiser player, because with the speed and maneuverability of the Marceau, you've got this ship that's just zipping all around on your side of the map, constantly raining HE shells down on you, constantly setting fires, and that's going to be a huge just annoyance. It's like a mosquito that's buzzing around you, lands every now and then, just takes a little bite of blood, and then buzzes around again, takes another bite of blood, and every time you try to slap it, it flies away. That is exactly how Marceau feels. It's death by 10,000 paper cuts. So that's again why it's such a good ship for anything competitive, because you send it to the all flank, and God help you if you have to actually push into one of these things. It's just, you're going to lose like half or 2/3 of your HP trying to deal with it, because it's so dang slippery and it's got that constant stream of HE. Not to mention, of course, that when you do finally hit it, you're barely going to do anything to it, because she has the French damage saturation mechanic, which is where the ship essentially saturates faster in terms of damage, which means you do less damage to it compared to a destroyer with the standard damage saturation mechanics. So it's a tough ship. It's fast, it's got those rapid-firing guns, and it's excellent at doing what it does, and definitely is, well, that's why it's on this list, absolutely one of the most frustrating ships to deal with, especially when you're in a competitive setting and there's a good player in it. So that takes us down to number 4, another ship which you will see pop up in, again, clan battles and COTS all the friggin' time, and that is the tier 10 Italian cruiser, the Napoli. The Napoli is, this cruiser is so freaking annoying. And this is speaking for someone that plays a decent amount of clan battles, and we do play COTS as well as much as we can, obviously, as far as we can get into COTS. But Napoli is a ship that always shows up in those 2 game modes as well. Why? Because it's a cruiser that when played properly can tank darn near battleship levels of damage. She has excellent side armor on her hull plating, and there's been so many instances where we try to focus down the Napoli because it's just sitting on the off flank or on the pushing flank and being a tank, and because the guy that's driving it knows how to angle properly, you bounce 18-inch, 17-inch, 20-inch battleship shells off the belt because the armor is that good. And it never fails that typically on the other side the Napoli is the last enemy ship to go down, and probably tanking 2 or 3 million potential damage in the process. It's just so stupidly tanky. And if you saw yesterday's video, the clips from Friday night's live stream, naturally, of course, when you finally catch the broadside of Napoli, a good bit of times, of course, you overpit it rather than citadeling it, because game physics, right? But besides the obvious tankiness of the ship, another factor that leads into that tankiness and that survivability is, of course, her exhaust smoke. She has, of course, the Italian exhaust smoke generator, which means that she can pop it and run at full tilt and be protected by her smoke screen from enemy spotting. So, you already have a pretty tanky ship, and then you give it the ability to just smoke up and, run away or heal. That's going to be a huge boon to this ship's survivability, and it most certainly is. Not to mention, on top of that, you still have these SAP secondaries that the Napoli gets, which means that when you are in that smoke screen and you can see the enemy ships, your secondary gunners can absolutely rip them a new one while you remain undetected. And she does have a catapult aircraft where you can make that happen. She has the 13-kilometer torps, the very excellent Italian main guns. She doesn't have SAP on the main guns because that would be a little bit crazy with all this stuff stacked on top of it, but she does, of course, get the Italian AP, and on her guns, it most certainly does hurt when you catch somebody's broadside. This ship is capable of punishing battleships. I'm not talking about like erasing a battleship's HP, but it's going to hurt if you let a Napoli catch your broadside and she's got AP loaded and she's got a clear shot at your side. So this ship is another ship that's excellent for anything competitive, an excellent all-flank, a ship that if you just need something to stick there and survive and keep the enemy preoccupied for, half the match, the Napoli is definitely your ship to go to. Again, I'm not saying it needs to be nerfed or anything. It's just an exceptionally frustrating ship to try and deal with when you've got a competent player in her. Now, the next ship, there's a bit more of an argument for that, because the next ship on this list is the Tier 10 Soviet aircraft carrier, the Nahkimov. Now, the Nahkimov thankfully has been bonked by the nerf bat a couple of times in recent memory, which is something that most definitely did need. However, given just the mechanics and the munitions that the Nahkimov has, it is still an exceptionally frustrating ship to try and counter. Now, the Nahkimov and the Soviet CV line in general, the mechanics there are pretty interesting. I do have to give Wargaming credit for trying to at least solve the biggest issue with CVs, and that's the fact that it feels like your A doesn't really do anything often. And while in like the brief instance that you're being attacked by a CV, you may shoot down 3 or 4 planes, but you still get, the full salvo dropped on the decks of your ship, or the full salvo torpedoes get launched, so the full salvo rockets still make it through, because the way the CV mechanics work, if you have, 4 planes in an attacking squadron, you shoot down 2, that's cool, but the rest of the squadron, there may be, 16 more planes in there, so you shoot down a couple of those planes. The planes from the rest of that squadron, the other 16, are going to replenish that squadron's planes that are attacking. Now, with the Soviet CVs, the way the mechanics work, the entire squadron attacks at once, which means that if you shoot down 3 or 4 planes out of the attacking squadron, that's 3 or 4 planes less of munitions that's about to be thrown at your ship. So, on paper, that sounds pretty good. But in practice, not so much. Now, the Soviet CVs, they're capable of dropping most of their munitions from outside the range of your medium to close range AA. And that's where a good chunk of your AA damage comes from. Sure, the long range AA, the flak bursts do hurt if the CV player flies into them, but often not, they don't, right? So, in that case, you can still get most of your planes off with Nahkimov. Now, they have removed a couple of planes from they removed, I believe, one from the one from the skip bomber squadron, and then one from the rocket squadron, and I think they finally did remove one from the torpedo squadron as well. So that obviously did cut back on the amount of munitions that are being thrown at your ship, but still with the way that the Nahkimov is and the large number of planes in the squadron, you're still able to get some pretty big alpha strikes off on the opposing ships. Add to the fact, too, that the plane regeneration rate is still pretty dang fast on the Nahkimov, and you probably really won't be deplaning a Nahkimov in a round unless you just get lucky and absolutely, get stacked with AA ships on your side, which definitely seems to happen when I play Nahkimov at least, but obviously when I'm not playing Nahkimov, the Nahkimov's on the enemy team, there's like 2 AA boats and they die in the first 2 minutes of the game, right? So it's still a very frustrating ship to play against. And if this was like old Nahkimov pre-nerf, this ship would definitely be like number 1 or perhaps number 2 on this list. But speaking about number 2, that brings us to the Tier 10 Soviet light cruiser, the Nevsky. Now, the Nevsky is a ship that, man, this is probably one of the better arguments for Soviet bias in this game that, you can present. Because this ship, her guns are just goofy, right? So, she has her Soviet bias guns, which means that the ballistics and all of the characteristics about the shells are very, very nice. You can get this light cruiser's range out to 20 kilometers-ish, and then the shells, unlike a lot of other light cruisers whose shells get super floaty at that range, sure, the Nevskys do get a little floaty, but they're still far better than the other light cruisers that you can get in this game. So you can pretty reliably hit your targets at that range in the Nevsky with her HE or with her AP. And she has Soviet bias AP, again with all the nice flight characteristics and wind drag coefficients and all that jazz, which means that at range her AP shells still hurt pretty well. And yeah, and again, this is a light cruiser we're talking about, and yes, this is a light cruiser where if a ship is showing you broadside, even at range, you still want to keep AP loaded because, in an ideal situation, the thing can chunk, even battleships for like 2 or 3K, more if it hits the superstructure, if she managed to hit the extremities of the ship, which with a good Nevsky player at range is something that is definitely possible. It's going to chunk you quite a bit. And even if you, decide to go angled into the Nevsky, then she can just swap on over to her HE and obviously just burn you down from there. And that's just the guns that we're talking about, right? We haven't talked about the rest of the ship. The ship is, of course, armored well enough to, when angled properly, unlike other light cruisers that even if you try to angle in them, you're going to get dumpstered. She does have enough side armor that she can bounce a good number of battleship guns in the game. So, yeah, imagine that, a light cruiser tanking battleship shells. Now, obviously, her bow and her stern aren't anywhere near as well armored as her midsection is, but obviously for battleships, with the dispersion, unless you're playing something like, Satsuma or the Shikishima, your guns probably aren't going to be accurate enough to reliably rail her stern or her bow, right? So that's another layer of frustration. And then, of course, the ship still has, all the Soviet goodies on top of it, too, radar and all that jazz, etc. So, yeah, this ship is quite potent. I mean, again, imagine that. A cruiser whose guns can reliably hit at 20 kilometers. A light cruiser whose guns can reliably hit at 20 kilometers. Yeah, it's annoying. Big surprise, right. Now, granted, the ship, if you do catch this thing broadside, it does have that Soviet turning circle, so it does take, about the same radius as the Earth to turn, so you can catch it broadside and you can clap it pretty hard, but just God help you if this thing gets into a position where she can stay angled and get her guns firing on you consistently. It's going to suck for you, but yeah, of course, Soviet bias, am I right? And that takes us down to number 1, which is a ship that I'm sure many of you will agree is just one hell of a ship to try and fight against, and that is everyone's favorite Tier 10 American submarine, the Gato, again, however you say it. So, the Gato, I think Gato's the way that you actually say it. I know you guys have shouted at me in the comments so many times about how to pronounce this ship's name, but yeah, whatever. So, the Gato, man, this ship is just, it's a gearing that you can't see, right? With the speed and her torpedo armament, you can deliver gearing strikes at 2 kilometers, 2 kilometers and change away from enemy ships without ever being seen, basically assuring that, again, you're pumping a full gearing's worth of torpedoes into the side of the enemy ships, and you can dive and just, they never know that you were there except for the torpedoes that just slammed into their hull. And that's, of course, quite frustrating, because a big part of how you deal with submarines is, of course, the ping indicator. When a ship pings, they get that little hydrophone effect that appears over the location where they pinged. But when you're not using the homing torpedoes and you're just walking up to enemy ships and shotgunning them, it doesn't really leave much of an evidence trail to track you by. Now, the Gato is a ship that is not the simplest to pick up. It takes a lot of practice to get the whole shotgunning down right. And I know you might be thinking, well, Sealord, it's just so simple. You just go at periscope depth and just walk up to him and shotgun him. And there's a little bit more to it than that. You got to, of course, be mindful of hydro. Be mindful of, hey, what ship spawned on my side? Am I going to run into the other submarine, or am I going to run into a DD? And, of course, a big chunk of it, too, relies on the enemy just being completely ignorant of the fact that they're being spotted, despite nothing on their minimap being inside their detection radius, at least as far as they can see, right? So things still do have to go right in order for you to pull this off, but definitely once you get the fill of the ship down and get the strategy down right, it is something that you can do fairly regularly. Now, with the way that submarines work, of course, submarines aren't really a class that affects the battle as a whole very, very, very much. Like that, their individual battle impact is pretty limited, right? Because normally with a submarine, you spend most of your time trying to take down one ship, because you got to sail over there, you got to get into position, you got to sneak up into range, and of course either get your torpedoes to connect to the ship, either from shotgunning them, from just dummy firing them, or from using the homing torpedoes. It all takes time, right? Where with other ships in the game, it's just, oh, let me fire my guns, they reload in 30 seconds, and here we go. Again, they're really like torpedo DDs that can submerge. But with the Gato, the fact that you can, go 38 knots at, or well, not 38, like 33 knots at periscope depth with, again, a rack of gearing torps and never be spotted by the ship that you're walking up to, that's a little dumb. And it's super frustrating when it happens, because oftentimes you feel like, well, what did I do wrong? And the answer may be, you just made the simple mistake of not paying attention to your surroundings, and sure, you deserve to be punished for that, but losing, potentially your entire ship because of one mistake, definitely can be frustrating. But I mean, do need to be paying attention to your mini-map and all that jazz. But again, with the fact that you can just walk up to them at pretty much 30 knots at periscope depth, that is ridiculous in my opinion. It's something that definitely I think we're giving us a look at nerfing. The fact that submarines can basically maintain their full surface speed when they're at periscope depth and they have a 2-kilometer detection range, that is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion, and something that I, again, really do believe Wargaming should take a look at. But anyway, guys, those are my top 5 most frustrating ships to play against, to fight against. Let me know what you guys think about my list in the comments down below. What would you add? What would you remove? Again, let me know all that good stuff in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Monday and wonderful rest of your week. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 75,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Again, hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.